She hugged a stranger to avoid her ex, without knowing he was a millionaire who would change her destiny. In the outskirts of Oaxaca, where cobblestone streets wound between low clay-colored houses, Elena Rivera grew up to the sound of silver meeting hammer. Their modest home was always bathed in warm golden light, where her grandmother, Doña Camila, sat by an old wooden table, her hands trembling yet skillful, shaping raw silver into delicate, radiant forms. "Remember this, Elena," she often said. "Every necklace, every ring must carry the soul of the maker and the soul of the one who wears it." From the age of 7, Elena was enchanted by the craft. She would watch the intricate carvings, the glint of silver catching the light, and imitate her grandmother with clumsy little hands. To her, silver was never just metal. It was memory, story, love etched into every line. As she grew older, Elena dreamed of taking her family's craft beyond their tiny town. She pictured women in New York, Paris, and beyond wearing handmade pieces from Oaxaca, each design carrying the warmth of Doña Camila's hands within its details. But such dreams felt impossibly far. By day, she helped in the family's modest jewelry shop. By night, she worked at a cafe, saving every peso she could. Each coin went toward one goal: attending an international exhibition where she could finally present her designs to the world. It was during this time that Marco Silva entered her life. They met at the cafe where she worked, as Elena scribbled designs into a battered notebook. Marco, handsome and perpetually glued to his Instagram feed, struck up a conversation with ease. He praised her bright eyes and natural style, calling her a woman with innate taste. For Elena, who had rarely been noticed by men, let alone a social media star, it felt like magic. Marco promised to use his influence to showcase her work, to bring her jewelry into the spotlight. For 8 months, Elena lived in a dream. Marco whisked her to glamorous restaurants, posed with her in glittering photos, and introduced her to his hundreds of thousands of followers as "my talented woman." To Elena, it was more than love. It was validation, the recognition she had longed for. But cracks began to show. Whenever Elena spoke passionately about a new design, Marco nodded distractedly before changing the subject to his next sponsorship or exotic trip. When she reminded him of his promise to promote her work, he only smiled. "Not yet. The timing isn't right." Worse, Marco began to criticize her simplicity. He compared her to other influencers, women draped in designer gowns, perfected by makeup artists. He told her she needed to look more professional if she wanted to accompany him to events. Each comment cut like a blade, leaving Elena doubting herself. The truth shattered her one June evening. Scrolling through social media, she stumbled upon a photo of Marco hand in hand with Valeria Torres, a famous influencer with millions of followers. The caption felt like a knife. "At last, I found my true other half." Elena's heart cracked open. If Valeria was his true other half, then what had she been all along? The answer came days later in a cold message from Marco. "Elena, I hope you understand. We're not on the same level. I need someone who fits my world. Don't blame me. I've simply evolved." Evolved, as though genuine love, as though her dreams were primitive flaws to outgrow. That night, Elena cried until no tears were left. She packed every trace of Marco, the expensive gifts, the smiling photos, into a box she swore never to open again. At the same time, she made another vow. Never again would she let anyone make her feel small. But vows are easier spoken than lived. The months that followed were steeped in doubt. Each time she raised her hammer to silver, Elena wondered if she truly had what it took. Maybe Marco was right. Maybe she was just a small-town craftswoman, unfit for the luxury world. And yet she remembered Doña Camila's words. True brilliance does not come from the gem, but from the hands and the heart that shape it. It was that belief in her enduring love for the craft that kept Elena moving forward, heart scarred, yet still beating with dreams too stubborn to die. That morning, the bus from Oaxaca to Mexico City rumbled out before dawn. Elena sat by the window, a small suitcase at her feet. Inside were not just clothes and tools, but her hope itself, a black velvet box holding 6 handcrafted jewelry designs. It had taken her months to save enough to pay the exhibition fee. Her space was nothing more than a tiny table in the emerging designer section, tucked away on the upper floor of the convention center. But to Elena, it was a world of possibility. When she arrived, her heart raced at the sight of the massive glass building glinting beneath the Mexico City sun. Inside, hundreds of people from across Latin America and Europe bustled about: designers, investors, established brands. The air was alive with excitement, but also suffocating, as though only the strong could survive on this stage. She found her booth, a small square table, 2 chairs, and a modest sign reading, Elena Rivera, Artesanías Camila. Carefully, she placed her creations on display. A pendant engraved with Zapotec motifs, a silver bracelet fused with volcanic stones, earrings inspired by wildflowers of the highlands. She arranged them with care, trying to carve out a warm corner amidst the grandeur. As she adjusted the light over the velvet case, a familiar voice sliced through her composure. "Elena, what a surprise to see you here." She froze. Her heart pounded so violently, she feared everyone near the jewelry booths could hear it. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Marco Silva, the man who once promised her the world only to cast her into the depths of humiliation. Now he stood there, immaculate in a tailored suit, that same arrogant smile plastered across his face. Elena wanted to run, yet her feet felt bolted to the polished marble floor. Her breath came short, her chest tight. No, she couldn't let him see her trembling, not after months spent piecing back together the fragments of her self-worth. In a wave of panic, Elena spun and spotted a tall figure walking past. Without thinking, she rushed forward, throwing her arms around him as if clinging to the last shelter in a storm. Her voice shook, breaking into a desperate plea. "Please, pretend you know me," she whispered, her voice breaking. The stranger froze for a heartbeat, startled by the desperate embrace. Yet instead of pulling away, he placed a firm, steady hand on her back, a silent promise of protection in the middle of chaos. His scent was clean and refined, his suit flawlessly cut, and there was something in his calm composure that made Elena feel instantly shielded, protected, without a single question asked. Just a few steps away, Marco halted, confusion flickering in his eyes. His smug grin slipped, replaced by a look of uncertainty. He muttered something under his breath before finally turning and walking away. Slowly, Elena pulled back from the stranger's arms. Her face burned with embarrassment. "Thank you," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the marble floor. She had no idea what she would have done without him, but when she finally dared to look up, she froze. Piercing gray eyes locked onto hers, sharp yet deep, as though they could see through every wall she had ever built. His smile was gentle, almost curious, and his very presence radiated a quiet power that made her chest tighten. Elena turned abruptly, vanishing into the crowd as if she could erase the moment. The crisp trace of his cologne lingered in her breath. The man remained still in the middle of the exhibition hall, his gaze following the small figure weaving away into the sea of people. Daniel Cortez, a name Elena had yet to learn, felt a strange stirring in his chest. It had been years since a woman had managed to surprise him this completely. What he didn't know was that her desperate embrace would become the first thread binding 2 fates that were never meant to intertwine. All night, Elena tossed and turned on the narrow bed of her cheap hotel room, replaying in her mind the moment with the stranger who had rescued her from the greatest humiliation of her life. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still feel that warm embrace, the silent protection he offered without asking a single question, the sense of safety he gave her. But at the same time, the mocking look in Marco Silva's eyes, the scornful words he had thrown at her, made the 6 months she had spent healing seem to shatter in just a matter of minutes. The following afternoon, it was her turn to present before the judges. 3 seats were already filled: a fashion magazine editor, a European brand representative, and a purchasing director from a major retail chain. Bright lights bore down, and Elena's face paled slightly. She drew in a deep breath and began. "My name is Elena Rivera from Oaxaca. This collection is called Raíces de Plata, Roots of Silver, inspired by Mexico's indigenous culture and my desire to bridge tradition with modern design." She introduced each piece: the silver bracelet symbolizing resilience, the wildflower earrings celebrating natural beauty, the engraved pendant retelling a Zapotec legend. But before she could continue, one judge interrupted. "Do you have any formal academic training in jewelry design?" Elena faltered. "I've learned since childhood, taught by my grandmother, and I have. Any experience in large-scale production? Supplier contracts?" Another pressed, voice flat. Her throat tightened as she tried to respond, but the barrage of questions came like hammer blows. They weren't interested in stories or inspiration. They wanted numbers, strategies, business plans. When Elena mentioned her pricing between 1,500 and 3,000 pesos, the three judges exchanged looks, then smirked. 3,000 pesos for a silver bracelet with no brand name? You don't understand the international market. These pieces are very pintoresco. The word struck her like a hammer to the chest. Pintoresco. Quaint, charming, but worthless to their world of luxury. Her presentation ended in chilling silence. "Thank you," one judge said with a polite smile that never reached his eyes. "We suggest you pursue more training in the commercial side of design and consider adapting your style." Elena bowed her head, her hands trembling as she packed away each piece. She left the stage like a defeated fighter, her heart unbearably heavy. Through the crowded halls, laughter still rang, lights still sparkled, but to Elena, everything had dimmed into shadow. She wondered if Marco had been right all along, that her dream had never belonged to this world. Elena sat quietly on a wooden chair in the section for emerging designers. Her hands trembled, still burning from the sting of her failed presentation. The words pintoresco, not commercial, unsuitable, echoed in her mind like a relentless refrain. Every hope she had poured into this trip seemed shattered. She considered leaving for Oaxaca that very night. The thought was painful, yet oddly comforting, as if giving up might spare her the struggle. "Elena Rivera?" The warm voice behind her made her look up. The stranger she had clung to the day before stood there. His suit was as elegant as before, his gray eyes steady, but this time with a hint of gravity. "You," Elena stammered, her cheeks flushing at the memory. He gave a slight smile. "Daniel Cortez. I believe we didn't have the chance to introduce ourselves properly yesterday." Her breath caught. That name was anything but unfamiliar. The Cortez Group was a luxury jewelry empire present in over 10 countries, and Daniel was its CEO. It felt as though the ground shifted beneath her feet. The man she had embraced in desperation was one of the most powerful figures in the industry. "I watched your presentation," Daniel continued, his tone deliberate. "And yes, the judges dismissed it, but not because it lacked value. They were only searching for what fits their mold. I, however, saw something else." Elena met his gaze, her eyes still shadowed with doubt. "And what exactly did you see? A failure? A small-town craftswoman with no chance?" Daniel shook his head. "I saw honesty. I saw hands that tell stories through metal. And more importantly, I saw a soul unlike anything on the market." Elena clutched the velvet box in her lap. His words washed over her like a cool breeze. But Marco's venom still lingered in her memory. Why me? Out of hundreds of designers here, why would someone like you choose an unknown from Oaxaca? Daniel's eyes did not waver. "Because I'm not looking for a name. I'm looking for difference, and you have that." He sat beside her, placing a folder on the table. "This is a proposal. The Cortez Group will cover all costs of production, marketing, and distribution for a new collection. But the ownership of your brand and designs will remain entirely yours. I don't want to take the soul out of your work. I only want to help it fly." Elena opened the folder, her vision blurring with emotion. In clear letters, the contract read, "All creative rights and brand ownership belong to Elena Rivera. The Cortez Group would serve only as producer and distributor." Silence lingered. Elena lifted her eyes, tears shimmering. "You truly believe I can?" Daniel smiled softly. "I don't just believe, I'm certain. The only question is, are you ready to believe in yourself?" In that moment, Elena felt a spark flare within her darkness. Though doubt still clung to her, a door had opened before her, a door leading to the path she had dreamed of but never dared to walk. 3 weeks later, Elena found herself at the headquarters of the Cortez Group in Mexico City. The glass and steel tower rose into the sky, catching the morning sun like a challenge. Walking through the grand lobby where employees in sharp suits hurried past, she felt out of place. She was just a girl from Oaxaca, her hands calloused from hammer and silver. But when she stepped into the studio prepared for her on the 15th floor, Elena was stunned. The wide room flooded with natural light, work tables draped in white cloth, glass shelves filled with gemstones, and a display wall for prototypes. It looked like the paradise she had once dreamed of, but never dared to believe could exist. Daniel arrived, not with an entourage as she had imagined, but carrying a folder and wearing his calm smile. He showed her around the studio, explained each corner, and ended with, "This is yours. From now on, Elena, you're not a guest. You're part of the Cortez group." The first days were daunting. Elena was used to working alone, but here everything required coordination. Gemstone suppliers, technical craftsmen, the marketing team. Each meeting made her feel small, as though she had stepped into a foreign language. "You have to learn to speak in numbers," Daniel reminded her as they reviewed her first budget sheet. "People can't measure passion, but they can measure costs, profits, and deadlines. If you want to protect the soul of your art, you need enough knowledge to make others respect it." Elena pushed herself to learn, step by step. By day, she spent hours with technicians, figuring out how to scale production without losing the handmade details. By night, she pored over books on marketing and business strategy, carefully jotting notes. She began to understand. For a dream to take flight, art needed the backbone of commerce. Amid the whirlwind, Daniel was always there at the right moment. He never gave her the answers, only questions that forced her to think. Why choose silver over a lighter alloy? If European clients prefer minimalist styles, how would you adapt without losing identity? At first, his questions frustrated her, but slowly she realized they widened her perspective. After 3 months, her new collection began to take shape. She named it Raíces de Plata, Roots of Silver. Each piece fused tradition with modern design, a necklace inspired by Zapotec spirals, reimagined in sleek contemporary lines. Silver earrings etched with wild daisies paired with sharp geometric patterns. A bracelet combining silver and volcanic stone, rustic yet elegant. Daniel studied the prototypes and nodded. "This isn't just jewelry, this is story, and that's exactly what the market is missing." Elena smiled, feeling a rare sense of ease. For the first time in months, she knew she had been right to seize this chance. Her relationship with Daniel grew into something unique. Not fiery romance, but trust. Deep, unspoken. He saw in her what others overlooked, and with him she learned that true strength did not lie in power or wealth, but in holding on to one's essence amidst the storm. One late evening, as they sat in the studio reviewing sketches, Elena asked softly, "Why do you care about these small, handcrafted things? You could collaborate with any major brand." Daniel leaned back, eyes fixed on the glittering skyline outside. "Because the world has forgotten that jewelry is not just to flaunt wealth. It's meant to connect people to their roots, to memory. And I saw that in you, Elena." His words left her speechless. In that moment, she knew her journey had entered a new chapter, one where the dreams of a girl from Oaxaca were steadily becoming reality. The night of the showcase finally arrived. The Palacio de Bellas Artes gleamed under the starlit Mexico City sky, its towering white marble columns glowing like guardians of art. This was not just a building. It was a symbol, a place that had hosted symphonies, ballets, great exhibitions, and now for the first time, it would be the stage for a jewelry collection crafted by a girl from Oaxaca. Backstage, Elena's hands were icy, clasped tightly together. Models were being fitted, technicians rushed about adjusting lights, and the hall buzzed with chatter in Spanish, English, French. Before hundreds of expectant eyes, she felt smaller than ever. Daniel appeared beside her, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. "Breathe. You've worked tirelessly for 3 months. Now let your work speak." Elena nodded, her heart pounding like a drum. Music began, a blend of guitar and violin, modern yet infused with the soul of Mexico. Spotlights flooded the runway, and the first model stepped forward. The hall fell silent. Against a pristine white dress, a silver necklace inspired by Zapotec spirals glittered under the lights. Next came the wildflower earrings, swaying gently with each step, followed by the bracelet of silver and volcanic stone. Raw and powerful, like the land of Oaxaca itself, reborn as jewelry. Each model carried not just adornments, but fragments of Oaxaca's soul, reimagined by Elena into modern form. The audience watched, breathless. Some whispered in awe, others lifted phones to capture the moment. In the front row, Doña Camila sat quietly, her eyes glistening. She had rarely left Oaxaca, yet here she was, watching her granddaughter carry the family's tradition onto a stage unlike any they had ever known. Beside her sat the artisans Elena had invited from her hometown. They murmured to each other, astonished and proud. When the final model walked the runway, the lights dimmed. A moment of silence stretched, and then the hall erupted in thunderous applause. Elena's knees shook as she was guided onto the stage's center. Hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Cameras flashed. Elena drew in a deep breath. She needed to say something, not just to the audience, but to herself. Not long ago, she began, her voice trembling yet clear. I stood before a panel and heard them say my work was too rustic, too pintoresco, that it had no commercial value. They told me to change, to forget my roots if I wanted a place in the market. The hall was utterly still. But tonight, Elena continued, her gaze finding her grandmother in the front row, I want to prove that our roots do not hold us down. They give us wings. From the hands of artisans in Oaxaca, from the stories left by our ancestors, we can create something beautiful, sustainable, and worthy of the world stage. Another wave of applause rose, louder, stronger, stretching long. Many stood to their feet. Cameras clicked furiously. Tears spilled down Elena's face, and she didn't hide them, because they weren't weakness, they were pride. From the wings, Daniel watched her with a quiet smile. He knew this moment was not merely professional success. It was the moment Elena Rivera stepped fully into her place, as an artist, a designer, and above all, a storyteller for an entire culture. After the dazzling night at the Palacio de Bellas Artes, Elena Rivera's name appeared in major fashion outlets. Images of the Roots of Silver collection spread rapidly across social media. Praise poured in, and orders arrived from New York, Paris, Tokyo. To Elena, it felt like a dream, but every dream carried its shadow. One afternoon, as Elena left the Cortez Group headquarters, she spotted Marco Silva waiting outside. Still polished and charming, yet his eyes now held something more. Calculation behind the arrogance. Elena, Marco said smoothly, congratulations. I never imagined the girl I once knew would stand on such a grand stage. Elena tightened her grip on her bag and tried to walk past, but Marco stepped in her way. But are you sure you know what Daniel Cortez is really after? Men like him, they don't help anyone out of kindness. You're just a pawn to polish his brand. The words struck her like grains of salt in an unhealed wound. She tried to dismiss them, but that night she couldn't sleep. Memories of Marco's betrayal tangled with new fears. Was she repeating the same mistake? The next day, Elena sought Daniel in his office. The room was full of light, but her heart felt heavy as stone. Daniel, she began, her voice rough, I need to know, why are you working with me? Is this just to exploit my story for your brand? Daniel studied her for a long moment, his gaze steady yet firm. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, and placed it before her. This is the first contract I gave you, he said. Read the last clause again. Elena unfolded it. The familiar words stared back. All creative rights and brand ownership belong to Elena Rivera. I could have easily written an agreement keeping all rights under the Cortez Group, Daniel continued, but I didn't, because I don't want to strip the soul from your work. I don't need you to polish my name. The Cortez Group has been renowned for years. The only thing I want is to help you reach the world. Elena felt her throat tighten. The honesty in his voice was unlike Marco's empty flattery of the past. She nodded softly. I trust you. In that moment, Elena knew she had closed the door firmly on her past, opening instead a path forward with someone who truly saw her worth. 1 year after the grand debut at the Palacio de Bellas Artes, Elena Rivera returned to Oaxaca, but this time she did not come back as a small-town craftswoman. She returned as a woman carrying a dream that had taken shape. Her grandmother's modest house had been transformed into a spacious workshop. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, falling across wooden tables where dozens of young women bent over their work, hammering, shaping silver, engraving patterns. Laughter mixed with the rhythmic clink of metal, forming a living symphony of hope. "Look at them, Elena," Doña Camila whispered, her eyes moist. "Once it was only you by my side. Now, a whole generation continues the craft." Elena clasped her grandmother's hand, still warm, though frail. "You began all of this. I'm only continuing the story." In the workshop, Elena taught more than technique. She taught belief. "Jewelry is not just for selling," she often told them. "Every design must carry the soul of its maker. When you place your heart into your work, the world will see it." The young women looked at her with admiration. They were learning not only a trade, but also how to dream. The story of Roots of Silver had taken Elena to major cities, but she always returned to Oaxaca, bringing back knowledge and opportunity. With the support of the Cortez Group, she created a scholarship fund for indigenous women pursuing artisan crafts. Daniel occasionally visited the workshop, watching quietly. He never needed to stand at the center. He knew the light belonged to Elena and her community. Once, as he saw her guiding a 16-year-old girl, he murmured with a smile, "You've turned a personal dream into a movement. That is true success." Elena only answered with a gentle smile. She knew her journey was not merely about escaping the past or proving herself to the world. It was about planting seeds for those who came after, so they would never feel as small as she once did. That evening, the workshop gathered beneath the old ceiba tree. Elena told them stories of Doña Camila, of quiet Oaxaca nights filled only with the sound of hammering silver. The young faces glowed with attention, their eyes bright. "We don't have to choose between tradition and modernity," Elena said. "We can carry both. When we keep our roots, we'll always know who we are, no matter where we go." The sun sank behind the mountains, painting the sky in golden fire. Elena looked at her students, and for the first time she felt complete. Her dream had become legacy, a living one, growing in the hands of the next generation. The love between Elena and Daniel grew day by day, not through grand gestures or promises, but through countless quiet moments. Nights spent over sketches, mornings with coffee shared in silence yet full of peace, glances exchanged when an idea came alive. Elena realized her heart had quietly, deeply found its home in him. One beautiful day, Daniel invited Elena to the beach. They chose a long stretch of sand near Puerto Escondido, where the sun painted the sea golden at sunset. Waves rolled gently, the salty breeze carrying the taste of freedom. Elena had no idea that this trip would mark the greatest turning point of her life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel suddenly knelt before her. In his hand was a velvet box, but instead of a ring, he held a small silver pendant. His voice trembled with sincerity. "Elena," his voice trembled, "you showed me that true worth is not in fame or fortune, but in the soul we pour into what we create. My story is incomplete without you. Will you be the one who walks with me, not just through success, but through every dawn and dusk ahead?" Tears streamed down Elena's face, not out of shock, but because her heart had long awaited this moment. "Yes, I will," she whispered, her voice trembling in harmony with the sea. Their wedding was simple, yet deeply warm. Not in a lavish ballroom, but in a flower-filled garden in Oaxaca. Doña Camila held Elena's hand as she walked the aisle, while the village artisans stood as part of the family, celebrating with them. The most special detail was the wedding rings. Elena had designed and crafted them herself. 2 simple silver bands engraved with Zapotec spirals, symbols of eternal connection. When Daniel slid the ring onto her finger, she knew every dream and trial had led to this moment. After the wedding, their life blossomed in simple joys. Each morning, Elena and Daniel shared coffee in their courtyard, listening to birds sing. She continued creating and teaching her students, while Daniel often stepped away from boardrooms to spend more time at home. Years passed, and they welcomed 2 little angels, 2 daughters with eyes bright as the Oaxaca sky. On weekends, the family of 4 would gather beneath the old ceiba tree, where Elena told stories while Daniel held their daughters close. One evening, as the crimson sunset draped over the mountains, Elena watched Daniel laughing with their girls, and her heart overflowed. From the girl once dismissed as pintoresco, She had found family, love, and a legacy that would live on. The final image was of silver sunlight spilling over the yard. Two little girls running in circles, their laughter echoing like bells, while Elena's hand rested firmly in Daniel's. On the garden table, the wedding rings she had crafted gleamed softly, a reminder that from silver, she had forged not just jewelry, but a home where love and happiness would forever dwell.